Today on the 1012, myself, Lea, and Eric are joined by Justin McLeod of D1 Softball to recap Texas Tech's win in Super Regionals and preview the Women's College World Series. Plus, we're breaking down each Big 12 team's off-season who didn't make the postseason. Coming up on the 1012 Softball Show.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Welcome to the 1012 Softball Show. Once again, it is not Thursday, but we are talking Big 12 softball because the season continues for the conference. Thank you for joining us today. Of course, we are part of the 1012 Podcast Network and partners with Sports Social, Europe's biggest sports podcast network. I'm your host, Phillip Slavin, joining me as they do every week. Look, I don't feel like I should have to introduce them. You should know who they are by now, but maybe this is your first time listening, and I feel like she would be disappointed if I didn't try and run through all of her various titles here on the show. She is the trash talk queen of the 1012 network. She's the most famous Iowa State softball alum. She is the queen of the Quad Cities. She is Baylor head coach Glidmore's third favorite person. She is Lea Nelson.
Thank you, and I would have been disappointed if you didn't run through all of them, so I appreciate it.
I feel like I'm just going to have to start addressing like emails of, hello, welcome Eric, and Lea. Here's the information for this week's episode. So, Eric, of course, being the voice of UCF Softball, one half of In the Circle podcast, and of course, the best Big 12 softball voice. He is Eric Lopez.
Well, it's also very important to mention I'm with D1 Softball because of the guests we have. It's very important you highlight my work as going perfect, 64 for 64 in bracketology because I like my work there at D1 Softball covering the postseason. But always good to be.
Appreciate it. Look, we're very excited for today's guest. We've tried to get him on all season, and every time he's like, well, I'm out of town. Well, I'm out of town. Well, I'm out of game. Well, I'm out of town. Well, he's out of town again today, but he's in town in Oklahoma City, which makes sense since that's where the Women's College World Series will kick off on Thursday. So finally, better late than never, Justin McLeod. Justin, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. I know it may not seem like that since I've told you no, I think 3 or 4 times this year, but I'm glad I finally was able to say yes.
Look, it's all the no's are fine as long as you eventually say yeah. That's how it works, right? It's like, it's okay. You can get rejected however many times. You just keep going. Don't take no for an answer. That's what we call being relentless and strong-willed. We're going to see how well this podcast recording goes because I can't tell. It looks like everyone's frozen. It may be a me thing. This is why you shouldn't switch from AT&T to Verizon Internet. So we're going to hope this goes well. Okay, we're going to kick things off because Justin is in Oklahoma City for the Women's College World Series, which gets underway on Thursday. And the reason we're still here podcasting is because there's still a Big 12 team alive in the postseason. Texas Tech heading to OKC for the first time in program history. I think the investment that was made, I think the hiring of Jerry Glasgow, I think all the work done to get Nyjah Kennedy to Lubbock has paid off in year one. Got to be excited. Let's start with their 2-0 win, super regional win over Florida State. Absolutely incredible performance. Texas Tech's offense did enough to get Texas Tech 2 straight wins to open up Super's first team to punch their ticket. Justin, looking at this Texas Tech team, what are your takeaways from their performance in Tallahassee?
I mean, I think actually with no shade thrown at Nyjah Kennedy, I think the thing that caught my eye most and first was how much havoc Texas Tech offense forced Florida State's defense into. Like, that's usually a very sure-handed Florida State defense. And Texas Tech's offense did everything they needed to scratch out a couple of runs, but they made that Florida State defense make errors. They forced errors. They made them work, and they took advantage of those errors. And I feel like all year we really haven't looked at Texas Tech's offense as this juggernaut of a unit. To be fair, I think most of the year they haven't looked like a juggernaut of a unit. But I really like the fact that they did what they had to do to scratch out a couple of runs because they knew that's all Nyjah was going to need. That's a tough environment to play in, and Tech looked like the veteran team, to be honest, not Florida State. Tech looked like the team that had been to the World Series a half dozen times. And that's hard to do. I feel like you can't just show up and look like that. Like that's tried and tested through the course of the season. That's the right preparation. But they looked the part, and that probably was what caught my eye even more than how good Nyjah looked in the circle, to be honest.
Eric, what was your biggest takeaway from
Justin,
Texas Tech? Go ahead.
Well, my takeaway, timely hitting. I think Justin alluded to it. Timely hitting. This offense that has scuffled through in the season, really starting to look like the Jerry Glasgow offense. I mean, I saw them at the Big 12 championship. That's when it started to click. Talking to a lot of the players, they felt it was turned a corner. And they did. They could have scored more runs than FSU, honestly. But they applied a lot of pressure on them to force FSU to make some errors. And then Nyjah was Nyjah. She is still, to me, the best in the sport. Again, I have no issues with Bree Ellis wins National Player of the Year. But to me, if you ask me who I would take, if we did a draft, I would take Nyjah Kennedy. And that is why they have a chance to do some damage here in Oklahoma City this week. By the way, continuing the streak, there's been at least one Big 12 team in the World Series since every year now for over a decade. Let's go with that, Phillip. Let's go with that. Congratulations on that. Congrats.
Well, and I believe I did that correct. It's the 6th straight Women's College World Series where a team currently in the Big 12 has made the postseason. We would take Oklahoma and Texas out of the conversation. It's still a conference of teams who are consistently in Oklahoma City at the Women's College World Series. And so
you mean you're not like another conference that's bragging about like two teams that got in that from the Pac-12? Is that what you're alluding to there?
Look,
okay,
she's
Eric,
very nice when she posted that. No. Supple tweeted it. She seems very nice, but like it may be factually correct. It's the first time in a long time the Big Ten got 2 teams. But again, all it took was, raiding the Pac-12 to make yourself a relevant softball conference. No one saw that and went like, yeah, the Big Ten. They're like, no, it's Pac-12. It's just like, that's the Pac-12. Big Ten gets no credit. Like Oregon was lucky to host with how bad the Big Ten was. But Lea, what were your takeaways from Texas Tech and Florida State Super Regional?
I just think Texas Tech is playing some of their best softball right now, which obviously is perfect timing with them going to the Women's College World Series. I know if I were to play Texas Tech, I would be pretty nervous just because not just Nyjah, but like Justin said, their offense and they're just scrappy and their base running is incredible. And you can tell that they want to win. They know what's at stake. And I think you can't really tell that this is all new experiences for a lot of these girls. Like, it seems like they're a veteran team. They know what they need to do to win, and it's really, really fun to watch. And it'll be fun to watch them at the World Series for sure.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I am excited to watch.
I left you speechless.
How are we not all rooting for Texas Tech? Yes, I mean, Lea, the hair today is just every time. Like, I'm glad you put it in a pony because how it looks now. If you had it out and flowing,
thank you.
I'm not sure how we'd be right at this moment.
I know.
Look,
I know.
If you're a Big 12 fan, you should be rooting for Texas Tech. Like, you should. I know it sounds wild to say, what if Texas Tech winning a national championship, being the first, non-Oklahoma team to do it in a long time, but the Big 12 needs as much credit and attention as it can get. And I know there's going to be a lot of conversation of, well, let's see him do it without Nyjah Kennedy. Well, I don't care. I would love to see Texas Tech pull this off. I would love to see how they do. They've got to get through Ole Miss first. I've seen a lot of complaining, not from you, Justin, but I'm going to mention Justin because I want your thoughts on this first, from certain fans of certain conferences, of certain teams, about how the Women's College World Series bracket happened to work out, where there's 4 teams on one side that feel like it's not fair that the other teams on the other side were lower seeded, and that they all on our side, it's not fair. We all have to play each other, and they all get to be over there. We should reseed this, which is malarkey and bull hockey, and only a conversation that ever gets brought up when people want to complain because their team didn't get an easy path. Justin, what are your thoughts on the current Women's College World Series bracket and its makeup?
I mean, to be honest, I'm more peeved at the people who set the game times on Thursday. The 2 all SEC matchups are the daytime ones. That's my biggest complaint. No, I can't stand the idea of reseeding. Like, if all the high seeds had gotten through, like, we'd be looking at what matchups now? Like, you think about that. Like, we'd be looking at 4 dynamite matchups if it was the top 8. So it's like, just because somebody beat a higher seed or because a higher seed lost, like, you shouldn't reseed it. I don't know. Like, I actually really like I did a radio hit earlier, and we were talking about those first 2 games in the bracket, and it's like, you have Oklahoma, Florida, Tennessee, and Texas. 2 of those teams are going to lose on day 1. 1 will go home on Friday. But it's like, you also have 3 teams in there, all of which have played Oklahoma. So if you want to dog on Oklahoma, you've got 3 teams that have played them, 2 of which took the series from them. And it's like, you get those matchups right off the bat. Like, yeah, do I hate that one of those teams is going to go home on Friday? Yeah, I do, because they're 4 of the best teams in the country. But in large part, the World Series is supposed to be the best teams in the country. So it's like, reseeding doesn't make sense to me. I understand why people say it, don't get me wrong, but like, to me, conceptually, it doesn't make sense. And I don't like it, to be honest. I don't like the concept of it, because I'm like, so what? So if you reseed, that puts Ole Miss and Oklahoma in game 1? Truth be told, I'd rather see Oklahoma and Tennessee in game 1, even if it means one of them plays for their lives on Friday. Like, I'd rather see that off the bat, because that's what you've worked towards in the bracket. You know who you're going to play when you get there. I mean,
careful, Justin. Greg Sankey might go after you. I mean, he's upset already about scheduling in football. I mean, you don't get him going on softball.
I mean, he's got better things on his mind than softball reseeding right now, I feel like.
I don't know about that. He's in destined floor. By the way, one of the things that people got to remember, the bracket's going to flip. So it's not like the college baseball version where, you're going to play those teams over and over again and you're going to champ. The bracket, it'll flip after the first 2 games. So it's not like, this advantage. It's going to flip. And so I'm with Justin. I have no issues at all with the bracket. It's just the way it played out. Does anybody get mad when, like, an 8 seed, for example, makes the Final 4 or the Elite 8 and people are like, oh, we're 3 seed? Like, come on. It's just the way it goes, Leah, right? With the brackets, it just so happened you have an unseeded team at Ole Miss who got hot, beat Arizona, beat Arkansas on their path there. Oregon certainly got some help by having A&M get knocked out. It's just the way it goes. And Texas Tech, we all said, whoever drew Texas Tech in the Supers drew probably the worst hand you could possibly as a top 8 seed. And unfortunately for FSU, that happened. So that's just the way sports goes.
No, I like how it is. I also am not a huge fan of change, though. So that might be a reason where I'm like, just keep it how it's always been. And I think good point, Eric, like, it flips. And once you realize that, it's a little bit easier to swallow. But yeah, I like the way it is. These are fun games. I'm pumped to start watching them.
If we're going to change anything, we get
Plus,
rid
by
of the
the
RPI
way,
and replace it with something that actually makes sense.
Well, right.
There's
right.
the RPI.
Well, yeah.
Yes, that's true. But here's the other thing. If you did hypothetically reseed it, who's to say, for example, you wouldn't seed a Texas Tech over Tech higher than Texas based on how they've been playing in the postseason?
Exactly.
And that's so you run into, and I'm not saying you do that. I'm just saying you run into those conversations if you try to reseed, which turns into another debate and headaches. So I just leave it the way it is.
Agreed. Very excited for this weekend, as we mentioned. Texas Tech Ole Miss is game 1. Winner of that, hopefully Texas Tech, Let's talk about this path. What do you think is the most likely path for Texas Tech, and how far do we think they can actually get here in Oklahoma City, Justin?
Ooh, how far can they get? I mean, they can probably get pretty far because they have Nyjah Kennedy. I mean, the bracket flip to me is the real piece because, well, let me take that back. The bracket flip to me is the place that I look at first as the, okay, well, this is where Texas Tech could go down. But the other piece of it, though, is if Texas Tech beats Ole Miss, you're going to play the winner of Oregon UCLA. Well, those two teams are both pretty darn familiar with Nyjah Kennedy. They've played her a couple of times. So you have an extra piece of familiarity there. It didn't help Mississippi State in the regional, but it did help Mississippi State in opening week this year of the season when they played her down in Clearwater and beat Nyjah in Texas Tech. So familiarity is one of your best friends when you're playing a superstar like Nyjah. But that said, the bracket flip is the thing that comes into my mind because you're going to play one of those tried and tested SEC offenses. I mean, you're going to play either Oklahoma, Texas, or Florida, who have dynamite offenses. Tennessee, that's got a little spottier offense, but's got a talented one, plus Carlin Pickens. So, like, the bracket flip is what comes to my mind. The thing is, if Tech makes it past the bracket flip, if they make it to the championship, like, they could go all the way. Nyjah could pitch them all the way. That's the kicker. I'm not going to say they will. I do think Tech falters. The offense gives me a little more cause for concern, especially considering some of the pitching talent in the World Series. But I think Tech has the potential, at least, Final Four, maybe even make the championship series. Like, I actually think that's a legitimate thing for them. Now, at the same time, I could also see them, win your first game and lose your next two, given who the opponents would be. Like, that's the other side. But I think ceiling wise, they could go all the way to the last game of the season.
I agree. It's the Nyjah factor. And I would say this, she made it with Stanford. I know we have questions about Texas Tech's offense. I still feel better about this offense than I ever did Stanford's while she was there. And so I do feel like this is her best shot so far at making a deeper run. Even with two teams familiar with her, with Oregon and UCLA, even with the offenses of the SEC on the other side, I think she's got the best offense she's had here in Oklahoma City in her collegiate career so far. And so I think this is her best shot she's had so far at making a deep run.
I absolutely think that's true. That's a fair point. That's absolutely true.
Well, and keep in mind, they just played there 3 weeks ago and had success. They won the Big 12 championship on that field. So that group has good feelings about that stadium. I want to say them and Oklahoma might be the only two that played this year in that stadium. Plus, Nyjah is a hitter. She was not a hitter at Stanford. She can actually help her own cause at worst case scenario, as she does. She leads the team in home runs. I think their draw is very good. I think they're playing an Ole Miss team that's probably happy to be there. I mean, their dog's probably happy to be there, so they're going to spend a lot of time focusing on the dog, Finley. So I like their draw. UCLA is an enigma. There you go. That's just a great show. UCLA is an enigma because they were outplayed by South Carolina for 13 and a half innings. And then somehow, some way, found a way to steal game 2 and then took it over to game 3. They have the experience of having been there, but I don't know which UCLA team shows up. I think they're the enigma of the field. And then Oregon is a young team that has a lot of speed that could pose Texas Tech with some problems because they could scratch out some runs with their speed if they get anybody on base. I think if Texas Tech's story is going to be defined by how many runners they leave on base, how many runners they get thrown out, because when they've lost games, that has usually been at the cusp of the problem. And to Justin's point, if you've got to face an SEC team and you have to beat them twice, whether it be in Oklahoma, whether it be a Texas, whatever, that's going to be a tall order at that point. If you're Texas Tech, you want to avoid that. You want to avoid the fact that you have to throw Nyjah twice in the same day. And the good news is with this format, in theory, they could throw her every game. I'm just going to throw her Thursday. And if they win that game, the winner's bracket game is not until Saturday night. So they could throw her Saturday. And even if they lose the game, she could throw Friday. Where they may run into problems is if they drop a game, say on Sunday or Monday, and now you got to play. And if necessary, it could get a little tricky. And obviously Mother Nature always plays a factor in the schedule in Oklahoma City. But the draw is there for them to make a run. And I think Justin's right. A Final Four finish is not unrealistic.
I can see them going really far. It'll just be interesting to see how they use Nyjah, because if you think in the past, like you've got Odyssey Alexander who pitched JMU through the World Series, but it gets to the point where it's like there's burnout. You can only have her pitch so many innings. And so obviously Nyjah's been here before. She knows how to handle that pressure and that difficulty, but it does get to a point where it's like, all right, how much longer can she do this for? So hopefully she can take them all the way. So we'll see.
I'm convinced we're going to get one Nyjah game where she pitches the shutout and scores the winning run. I'm just like,
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Shutout win, Nyjah game. Like I'm convinced it's coming. It's at some point, be it game 1 or game 2, it's coming. I feel it in my bones. Well, I am very excited for all of the Women's College World Series action this weekend, starting Thursday, as we have mentioned. Justin is there, so you have plenty of coverage at D1 Softball. Eric will have plenty of coverage at In the Circle, and Lea will have plenty of coverage of whatever's happening in the Quad Cities on her social media accounts as well.
Craftsman Days are here at Lowe's with big savings on the tools you need. Right now, get a free select tool when you buy the Craftsman V20 2-pack battery kit. Whether it's the backyard, the bathroom, or beyond, Craftsman has the tools to help you power through and get the project done right. Because DIYing is unpredictable, but your tools shouldn't be. Shop Craftsman at Lowe's today. Valid through 6/18 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
I do want to talk about the rest of the Big 12 a little bit. We talked quite a bit about the teams who made it to the postseason last week. This week, I want to touch on what's next for the Big 12 teams who did not make it to the postseason. That, of course, is Baylor, BYU, Houston, Kansas, Iowa State, and Utah. We're going to do this in alphabetical order. So let's start with Baylor. Glenn Moore is going to be back in Waco. Baylor are currently the only Big 12 team without a player entered into the transfer portal, though they did lose 11 seniors off this year's roster. It's going to be a very, very different team next year in Waco. I mean, does this feel like a rebuild? Do we think this is a reload? Or is it something where we go in with low expectations and they're going to kind of surprise us all just because we don't know who this team is?
Well, I think without having any players in the transfer portal, it's a testament of Coach Moore and what he's doing. I mean, I've only ever heard amazing things about, his coaching. So it will be interesting. I think it will be a little bit of a rebuild year because, I mean, no matter what, whether those 11 seniors were the best players ever or not, like you're losing a big chunk of your team, big chunk of family. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But yeah, it has to be a rebuild here for sure.
No, it is definitely a rebuild, and it's going to be a what if for Glenn Moore, a what if. And think back to losing Aaliyah Binford after the fall semester. Think of the impact that has. There's no way, Justin, would you agree that the Ole Miss is in the World Series without Aaliyah Binford? And I would argue if Aaliyah Binford was still at Baylor, they would have made the tournament. That's how talented she is. But I think it's a rebuild for Glenn Moore and his young group, and trying to 11 seniors is a big, big ask to do. I just saw UCF do it. UCF was successful because of their recruiting class. So we're going to find out about Glenn's recruiting class with Baylor. He seems, when I spoke to him at the Big 12 tournament, to still be enthusiastic, still enjoying the coaching side of things. But you do wonder how, this rebuild, Justin, for Baylor.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rebuild. It's a rebuild to the hilt. Like, the thing is, like, this year, I actually think Baylor overachieved for where they were. And I understand that sounds weird to say since they missed the tournament. But for losing Benford at semester and how big of a piece she was on both sides of the ball for them. Like to be able to take, I mean, think about it. You think Lily Walker, she's in as a 1-year transfer rental, and she was a career reliever at Duke, and she turned into their most valuable pitcher. Like I think she threw something like 150 innings this year. Like Shaylin Govan comes back from injury and looks like her old self in large part. Like so some of the different ways Baylor got production on both sides of the ball, I think they overachieved for what they had and what their potential was at the start of the year. But with what you lose, because the thing is, you lose Walker, you lose Govan, you lose Tariah Coleman, whoever else is in there. It's a rebuild to the hill, and I don't know what a rebuild looks like at Baylor. Like if you think back to when Baylor went, 2 or 3 years missing the NCAA tournament when they broke their streak of making the tournament. Like they had some serious rebuilding to do in there. Glenn Moore finally dipped his foot in the transfer portal, got some kids into where it hastened that rebuilding process. They made it back to the tournament, ended up making even a super regional last year. But this is kind of in that same boat. This is that I don't know what this looks like for Baylor. We'll see what the portal looks like for them. They've had some mixed success in the portal. I mean, you pulled Walker in, and I don't think when they brought her in, I don't think anybody realized how valuable she was going to be for them. So Glenn, since he got into the portal game, he's done well with some of the people he's picked up out of the portal and the impact they've had. But it's a rebuild. It's just, to me, it's more of a matter of how big of a rebuild and how long is it going to take to get back to, being a tournament team and having the makeup to do that and make a run.
They, as I mentioned, no transfer portal additions thus far. Their 2025 class included 7 signees, so they've got some roster spots still to fill. I'd be shocked if he doesn't try and pull a few pieces out of the portal, as everyone does. Portal's been open for, honestly, as many people as in it, not that long. So still a lot to be determined there for Baylor, but definitely going to be an interesting season for them, and how quickly can they get this rebuild off the ground. But look, you said it. If you think Baylor overachieved, then there's no question Glenn Moore is still firing on all cylinders, and still a great coach. And so I would trust him in this rebuild. If he feels motivated to still be there and doing it, then I have full belief that he'll figure it out. If not within a year, then within a couple of years. Very different story at BYU. Second straight year, first 4 out of the tournament. And if maybe this is the first time you've listened to this podcast this season, so I hate to beat a dead horse, but I'm gonna. This comes down to scheduling. Period. End of story. We know this is a good team. They're well coached. The offense saw a bit of a dip this year from what we would expect from BYU. But until they fix the non-conference scheduling, this is what's going to happen. Like I'm sorry, putting all your eggs into the Big 12 conference play basket. I'm sorry. Let's just be honest. This is not the SEC. You can't play a weak non-conference schedule and then just expect to get into the postseason because you have SEC on your jersey. You're going to have to do some non-conference work in the Big 12. It's not fair, but it is what it is. So they're just going to have to schedule better. Like I don't know what else to tell them, because I don't think this has been I think this has been a good team 2 years in a row who deserved to be in the postseason, but got left out because bad RPI, because terrible non-conference strength of schedule.
Well, you're not wrong. I have heard that they are in the process of fixing that for next year. So I think they've heard you, Phillip. They've heard me. They've heard Justin's. They've read Justin's writing from what I've been told. Trust me. So I think they're working on that for next year. Now we'll see what it looks like when it comes out and all that. I've talked to them. Now they will point to the fact, they're in Provo, Utah. You can't just bust games and get top 50 games in Provo, Utah, like you can in other places. And I think that's kind of been their argument to some extent on that. Plus I know they were bothered by the fact, for example, they have more top 100 wins than teams from the Big Ten, and yet the Big Ten gets the benefit of the doubt when they have a bad schedule. And I'm assuming he was referring to maybe the Indianas or the Northwest or whoever he was referring. The BYU folks were referring to. So I think there's some frustration on it, but I do, from what I've been told, they believe they're fixing that, they're resolving that, and they think they'll have a very tough non-conference schedule come 2026. We will all find out. And Phillip, I know they expect you to break that schedule down when it does come out.
I was going to say, Phillip's going to definitely be the judge of how tough their schedule is, and we'll
we will all get together in the middle of August or whenever it comes out, and we will discuss we'll do nothing but discuss BYU's non-conference schedule.
I don't know if Justin wants to take part in that one. I think he's in August. He might, take a nap, a 5-minute nap before, transaction happens, maybe.
Well, to be fair, too, one thing I have to throw out there. Yes, BYU needs to shore up their non-con scheduling. Like, you go on the road for 6 weeks, you choose where you go. So, if you pick a place that's got a good host, you're probably going to get somebody good in there. If you pick a place that's a bad host, you end up with a bad field. Like, that's how these things work. But it would also be helpful, those few games that BYU can bus people to them in Utah, it would be helpful to not lose those games. Like, there was that little pesky Utah Valley loss towards the end of the season last year for BYU, the 199th team in the RPI, just for the record. That, you don't lose that game, maybe you're 64 instead of 65. Like, you lose to the 199th team in the country, it doesn't help. So there's an extra piece to that, too. If BYU, whatever their scheduling looks like, you also have to win the games that you're supposed to win. Like, that's the extra piece, because it seems like BYU loses one or two of those every year in the midst of not the greatest non-conference scheduling, too.
Yeah, I think you could say that for a couple of Big 12 teams, couldn't you, Lea?
Right. I thought that was a perfect segue, Justin, into the next team we need to talk about.
I'll wrap on this on them. I agree, Justin, but when you load your schedule down with a ton of quad fours, like, that in midweeks, the best you can do is bussing in teams that are going to be not great for the resume. So you can't fill weeks 1, 2, and 3 with bad teams on the resume. You have to say, like, look, our quad 4 games, our games we're going to play reserves, are going to be on Tuesdays during the regular season or during the conference play, when we bust in the Utah Valleys and the Utah States and the Utah Techs and the Utah whatevers. Like, that's fine. That's that case. So then filling weeks 1, 2, and 3 with a bunch of quad 3, quad 4 teams it's your own fault. You schedule that many quad 4s, you're asking to suffer some really bad losses. You just are. Okay, so going in alphabetical order.
Let me play the devil. Well, let me play the devil's advocate, defend him here, since instead of piling on. How many teams are interested in having BYU in their tournaments, considering they can't play on Sundays? How many teams are excited to play a BYU? Don't look at me, Justin. Come on, I'm making a case here. I'm just telling you what I've been told, which is, there's a travel aspect of it. Are they willing to go east or not, budget-wise? Can you fit them in on a schedule where they don't play on Sundays? There's a lot of factors. I'm not excusing. I'm just playing devil's advocate that, they've had some obstacles. But again, no excuse. They're working on it. They should have a much better schedule on paper this upcoming year.
Okay. Alphabetical order should be Houston, but since Lea wanted to try and force a segue, we'll roll with Lea's segue here and talk about Iowa State, a team that I think we all felt really good about as the season came to a close. And look, if only conference play mattered, or the time of conference play on the calendar, Iowa State would have been a postseason team and would have been a scary postseason team, or a scary team to have in your regional. Alas, the first 4 weeks of the calendar do count towards your overall record. I mean, for Iowa State, a couple injuries into the portal so far, but there's just such a young roster with a lot of talent and a lot of players that really perform. Yes, you've got to replace a few pieces. You absolutely do. But I think they bring so much back. The question for Iowa State is as simple as, can this team figure out how to come out of the gate and win games? Can you not drop game 1 to Stony Brook or Drake or whoever it is you're going to have to play? Can you come out of the gate strong? And so I feel like this is the third year in a row where we're going to go into the off-season asking, can Iowa State carry the momentum from conference play of this past season into the start of next season. So far, it's been no. But I think this is the year where they're bringing the most talent back from the previous season into the next one. And so I'm curious if they can actually do it this year. It will be interesting to see how they fill out the rest of this roster. I wouldn't be shocked at this point to see if Pinkerton brings in a transfer or two just to kind of round things out now that we've seen him decide to go down that route. And I think it worked really well for them this year. Sidney Mallett was fantastic for them as a transfer in. So I think I am the highest heading into the offseason on Iowa State I've been in a long time. It's just, can this momentum carry over to next year?
I mean, you nailed it on the head, Phillip. They have to figure out a way to start better. It's been a thing. It's been a horrible thing for Iowa State the past few years, where I think in their heads, the season is so long where those first couple games don't really matter, but they, as we can see, especially this year, like, they really do matter. And I think Coach Pink's going to go back to what he did a couple years ago, which was just really attack a hard, non-con schedule. He used to do that all the time back when I played, and I thought it was crazy and it was a little miserable, but like, you're already traveling for 7 weeks. Might as well go to some really good teams and compete and maybe sneak 1 or 2 wins, which could really help them. And then, Coach Pink has to dip his toe again into the transfer portal. It worked for him. I think this was like the first time that he really tried to do it. And obviously it was a success. And so I don't see why he wouldn't do that again. He probably feels a little more comfortable. And there are, you saw there was a pitcher and so far a second baseman that are in the transfer portal, and he needs some more middle infielders. And I think the other thing that people need to realize is someone's got to step up on Iowa State and be a big leader. Angelina Allen has been a leader for Iowa State the past few years. She is going to be a huge loss, not just, offensively, but the way she just leads that team. So it'll be interesting to see who steps up and what Coach Pink does. But I think they have all of, every single chance to just do great things next year.
I concur with Miss Iowa State herself. What am I going to do? How am I going to argue with that? That was well said. I can't go. Justin, what do you have? You have a counter to Lea there?
Do we lose Justin?
I think Lea just left him. Just kind
I think I just literally left you. Like, man.
Yeah. Your statement was right on.
Thank you.
Flash the pearly whites, gave the hair a little wave, and Justin is speechless.
Thank you.
He doesn't know what to do with himself. Justin must be at whatever hotel you go to, Eric, whenever you're in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
That's true. He is in Oklahoma City, so that's where I have my issues too.
No, Justin knows not to talk bad or anything about Coach Pink, because Coach Pink will get him, and he'll listen.
I wanted to know the interaction with you two. I was more interested in that.
What, me and Justin or me and Coach Pink?
No, I already know you and Pink. It was more you and Justin.
No, Justin and I go way back. He covered Cyclone. He was the first one to cover Cycloneers when it first broke. So we're like this.
I don't know if you guys know this. There's this little pesky thing called the mute button that when you can't get it undone, tends to pose a problem. Yeah, that's not the finest moment for somebody who's supposed to be less than technologically averse, but. We were discussing Iowa State before my lovely faux pas. I think the one thing that I concur with Miss Nelson, that the scheduling, I think, is actually underratedly key for Iowa State. Because the thing about it is, you actually can afford to lose games in the early goings. Like, the Big 12 strength of schedule is not going to buoy you the way the SEC does, Phillip, like you said about BYU, but it is going to help. Like, in large part, it's going to help. And if you're going to win games like Iowa State has started really doing in conference play, that's going to help. You can afford to lose games in the early going. What you can't afford to do is to lose games to Stephen F. Austin and FIU and things like that. So making the schedule harder probably seems like the antithesis to making a tournament resume because maybe you don't win as many games or whatever. But the thing is, if Iowa State's going to start slow, maybe even the first time they get on dirt and go 1-4 like they did opening week this year, that's not a damning thing by the end of it. It's a matter of who the 4 are you lose to. Like, you can't lose to Stony Brook and FIU and Indiana twice. What you can do, and I'm going to pull one out of thin air, what you can do is you can lose to Clemson and Florida Atlantic and Indiana and Clemson again, and all of a sudden you're 1-4, but those 4 losses are going to age just the same as an Oklahoma State or whatever would. So I think the scheduling is the one thing for Iowa State. And now I think Iowa State's got the roster. Maybe you don't go 1-4 even against those teams. Maybe you go 2-3. Maybe you go 3-2. And all of a sudden in 1 week, in week 1, in this hypothetical world we're building, like, your fortunes are completely different. Because the thing about Iowa State is they were always fighting an uphill battle. Like this past year, you lose to Stony Brook and FIU or Indiana and FIU, like 3 of your first 4 games you lose, and those are the teams. It's uphill from there. Or it's downhill from there, whatever the euphemism is. You're behind the 8 ball. That's where we're going. But the thing is, you play better teams, whether you lose or not, it doesn't hurt you like that. You give yourself a little leeway. Like, because I think Iowa State actually, by the end of the season, was playing like a tournament team. Problem was, they were out of the tournament race just with the losses they had in the non-con. Like, they did it to themselves. There was nothing you can do about that at that point.
Justin, you make such a good point, too, of them always having to play downhill or uphill, whatever we decide. Because, like, as a player, having that in the back of your mind is so difficult because you're pushing, you're trying to win all these games, but in the back of your head, you know, like, whether you win this or lose this, there's still a chance that you don't make the tournament because of those silly little losses at the beginning. And it's hard to kind of just play free because, you know, Coach Pink loves the RPI. He wants to make the tournament, obviously. And so you're kind of reminded of those things. And it's just, these girls just want to play softball. They don't want to have to think about that. But when you have those losses at the beginning of the season, it's hard not to think about that and play with that in the back of your head.
Well, and one thing I want to throw in too is it's not a metric you ever see with the selection committee, but it is something that I strongly believe matters and factors in. It's that whole having a tournament history thing. Like when you're a team that's been out of the tournament for whatever it was, 30 years or whatever, or even has had a drought, you know, was in it back in the day every year, but has been out for 10 years or whatever. It's a lot easier to end up on the cutting room floor on Selection Sunday. It's a lot easier to be, okay, well, you know, 2 teams, this is one, this is the other. Let's go with the one who was in it last year or who's been in it. It's instead of the up-and-comer, you go with the old guard. Maybe isn't a subconscious tiebreaker or whatever. The thing is, Iowa State got over that hump. They're not a team that hasn't been in for 30 years. They're a team that wins in the Big 12 and has made the tournament. So the climb with the right strength of schedule and with the right results, the climb's not as steep as it was 5 years ago either. Like, that's the one thing Iowa State has working for them. With the right resume, they're not out of the conversation. They're not having to battle just to be considered. They're going to be considered with the right resume. You just got to have the resume in the right place, I feel like.
All right, so Iowa State trying to climb uphill both ways through the snow next season in hopes of a postseason berth. Let's go non-alphabetical still to Houston.
This is the real reason why Justin's here. This is the real reason Justin's here.
Kristen Vesely no longer the head coach. She was not retained. So Houston is in the market for a new head coach. It's not shocking they haven't named anybody yet. Lots of jobs that are open where they haven't named anybody. The postseason's still going on. A lot of potential assistants still coaching. And I do think sometimes this process with softball takes a little bit longer than it does in other sports. I mean, that's the story for Houston. And as soon as they hire a coach, we'll have an episode and we'll talk about whoever that is. I think the top candidate name that continues to get talked about is Steve Singleton, who's the assistant over at Texas, who is still playing in the postseason. And I think that might have something to do with why we haven't heard much out of Houston as far as official word on candidates.
Well, you know, Phillip, I mean, Phillip, there was a fine article that came out on D1 Softball on Tuesday with the candidate list this week over the Houston. If only we had the person that wrote that candidate list on the show. Oh, wait, we do. Wait. Yeah,
Eric, you wrote the list?
No, it's not me. I'm not as in depth
Leah
on the
wrote
list.
The list.
I mean,
yeah,
if it was I
you
was
caught it. You caught me.
All right, third time's a charm. Justin wrote the list. Absolutely. That's fantastic. Justin, it feels like Steve Singleton is the name, the number one target, the guy that they would love to get more than anybody else, just because what a great job he's done at Texas, the ability to recruit at Texas. He's a candidate who gets popped up for just about every job in and around Texas that comes open ever since he's kind of arrived at UT. They're still playing, so obviously no decision on that will be made until he's done coaching. But talk to us about Singleton and who you think are. I've read the candidate list you put out. There's a lot of great names. Some I agree with. Who do you really think is kind of top targets for Houston at this point?
So Singleton, yes, top of the list. But the one thing about it is I'm not sure that Singleton actually is the top candidate. I think he's the top of the list, but I'm not convinced he actually is the top candidate, if only because Houston can't wait around completely. They can't sit around and say, we're just going to, twiddle our thumbs until Texas is done. Houston's already done some preliminary stuff, and Singleton wasn't included in that. So the one thing that tells me is, okay, well, you're looking at candidates that maybe you can snap up. Now, doesn't mean Singleton's out of it by any stretch. What that tells me is they're just not willing to sit on their hands, which actually is a hopeful sign for Houston. I mean, there's a lot of hand sitting that has and can be done there, and they're not sitting on their hands, so that's a positive. The one thing I think is key in this search is they need somebody who either has or demonstratively can rebuild a program. Either somebody who's done it and has a track record of doing it, or somebody who's been part of one. I think that's the biggest key for Houston in this search. I think they've got some candidates that fit that bill. I also think the recruiting is going to be so key. So you mentioned earlier that Baylor was the one Big 12 program that doesn't have anybody in the portal. Houston, without a coach, only has one player in the portal. So that to me really stands out. There's, for whatever the reason is, there's a reason that everybody on that roster is sitting around and waiting. I mean, you've got some players on that roster that could go a lot of places if they went into the portal. They haven't gone into the portal. So I think that's something too, where the recruiting ties are going to be the recruiting ties and the recruiting acumen are going to be super key for a new hire, because Houston clearly knows what they have in their recruiting class currently. That's one place they have not been deficient, is recruiting. They're keeping those players, at least as of this point. They're not in the portal. So I think you need a program builder. You need a program rebuilder. But then you also need somebody with the recruiting skills to really come in and keep doing what they're doing. And that's the one place Houston really hasn't failed the last few years, is recruiting. They've had some really good talent come in just via the high school ranks.
From a position player standpoint, the pitching's been brutal.
Don't talk about Houston's pitching. That's not kind. I was trying to say nice things here. Like the talent that has come in has been solid, has been excellent. They've had good recruiting classes. That's where I'm sticking to. But I think those are the two things that a new coach is going to have to be. And that's where I think a lot of Houston's list and potential list really does meet, is you've got a lot, including Singleton, a lot of people with good recruiting ties, good recruiting acumen, but also have been part of, because you have to think about it. Singleton walked into Texas, when Mike White took over, was okay, wasn't great. By the time Singleton got there, they were a little better than okay. But since Singleton's been there is when they've really hit their highest highs. So it's a different level, yes, but that part of building, sustaining, and all that is something even Singleton has done. So I think those are the two common things that you see in the pool that Houston has and is kind of assembling, is the recruiting skill set, but then also that building and rebuilding skill set too.
Looking at your list of candidates and other lists of candidates and people that I just kind of put in my list of like, The ones I feel like I've seen the most, of course, Singleton, and then it's Freeman at Southeastern Louisiana, and former LSU assistant Howard Dobson, who took a year off and is now with the AUSL. What are your thoughts on both of them? And the one name that you didn't have that I want to throw in the mix here is James Landreneau at McNeese.
So all three have kind of been talked about for Houston at different times when there was a possibility that the Houston job might open. Like, all were tossed around on the rumor mill, if you will. Freeman's star is clearly the highest because Southeastern not only has made the tournament the last 2 years, but you eliminate Clemson one year, you eliminate LSU on their home field the next year. So Freeman's star between all of them is clearly the highest. I think, too, Freeman probably fits the bill best of that building and rebuilding piece. When Landreneau took over McNeese was in a good spot, and he's sustained that well. Dobson, obviously, at LSU, they were pretty consistent. So I think that's why Freeman was on my list over Landreneau, to be honest, is he fits the bill, and his star is the highest right now. Obviously, eliminating LSU, beating them twice, that's about as high as your star is ever going to get when you eliminate an SEC team on their home field in the regional. Like, that's your star doesn't get much higher than that at that point. Landreneau's a solid candidate. Like I say, McNeese has been consistent under him. But the thing is, if you're looking at a Southland coach versus a Southland coach, I think you're looking at Freeman over Landreneau right now, just because Freeman's star is so high based on the last 2 regional appearances. And that's not anything against Landreneau. Okay. It's just how it is. Like, Southeastern's been in the tournament and they've won, period. Dobson, the biggest thing there is, does he come back to college? Does he come back to college ball? He's coaching the AUSL. He's got a job outside of softball besides that. Does he want to come back into college? Does he want to get back in? His son's in college now as a college baseball player at UL Lafayette. Does he want to do it? That to me is the biggest question. He's got the recruiting ties that I've already said are key, but does he want to get back in? The one thing, too, that I think doesn't need to be left on the table is a lot of the candidate names being tossed around are male coaches. I don't think we can ignore the fact that there's a very strong possibility that Houston, at minimum, wants to look at, okay, what are the best female coach options? Like, we have to remember this is a women's sport at the end of the day. So I think that's something that's key, too, is a lot of the most popular names on the rumor mill or whatever you want to call it are males, but there are some good female candidates out there, too, that I think that Houston could ultimately look at as well, who kind of fit the same bill in the recruiting and the rebuilding pieces.
Well, I love Jordan Clark and what she's done at FAU. My question would be, is Houston, I hate saying this, but is Houston a good enough job to make the jump from FAU to Houston, or does she wait for an SEC job to open?
I mean, I wouldn't leave the beach for Houston. I don't know about the rest of you, but I wouldn't leave the beach for Houston.
I mean, she can sit there and continue to rack up wins in the American until an SEC job opens up and they come after her. So I would love to see her at a Houston or a Big 12 school. I don't know that you're going to be able to get her. And from there, I mean, there's other good candidates, but that was, if we're talking about female coaches, I would be my first call. That would be number one on my list.
Yeah, and I think it should be, and that's why she was on my list. Do I think you get her to Houston from FAU? Probably not. Again, I wouldn't leave the beach to go to Houston. There's not a lot of places I would leave the beach to go, to be honest. But I mean, if you're looking at candidates and all that, she's one I would absolutely say no if I'm Houston. Like, if I'm Eddie Nunez, like, I'm at least making the call, because you never know. And she fits the two things that Houston needs the most. She's rebuilt that FAU program fast, and then the recruiting piece, like portal and otherwise, like the recruiting's been dynamite since she got down there. She's not the only one on that list that fits that bill, but she would absolutely be the 1-1 if they prioritize wanting a female head coach. She would be the 1-1 if I was running the search.
All right. Well, we will continue to keep an eye on that search, and we will have a conversation once someone is named.
This is why,
Eric.
Phillip, this is why I get text messages from people that just come to me and say, hey, what does Justin know about the A blank job? Like, people used to ask me what I knew about the job searches. Now they just skip me and they just, hey, what does Justin know? Do you know what he knows? Like, Lea, do you know what it's like to be asked to think about what somebody else is thinking? Like, that's how good he is.
No, that's tough, Eric. That's a tough position to be
Tough for
in.
the ego. Tough for the ego.
Yeah, tough. Definitely a humbling experience, I could assume.
It is. Just like I've heard, like, just when I've come up to the Big 12 tournament, it's like, hey, what's it like co-hosting with Lea Nelson?
Right. Tough for you.
Yeah.
Get out of town.
Glenn Moore asked you that, didn't he? That's who asked that question. Was Baylor Softball.
Yeah, for sure. It was
Glenn Moore. Yeah. What's it like hosting a Big 12 softball podcast with my third favorite person? Okay, so let's move on to Kansas, which is a conversation where I don't quite know where to even begin with Kansas. Last year felt like the year because of how much they brought back. This year there were some signs, but I don't know with Kansas what about this program over the last however many years makes me look at this and go, what can they do to get to the postseason? Well, last year should have been 2024 should have been the season, and it fell short. 25 was not there. I look at this team and I know that Coach McFalls is pretty excited about the freshmen she has. I think she's pretty excited about the class she has coming in, but I just don't know with Kansas, like what can they do to get this program toward a point where it's able to make a postseason berth?
Am I going first here?
Get Bill Self's NIL money?
Get the NIL they're going to use on one player on the basketball roster and just invest in the softball.
I mean, look, this is the one thing that the problem with McFalls right now is you can't even use the excuse of, well, you're at the shadow of basketball and everything, because look at what the baseball program just did with Dan Fitzgerald, who won Big 12 Baseball Coach of the Year and turned this Kansas team around to where they're a 2-seed at Arkansas. Like, they're really good. And the way they've done it, because I spent some time with the Kansas baseball staff because I called one of their series this year in baseball, was they got players from the lower levels, the JUCOs and things like that, and they develop players. So to me, with Kansas, she's got to develop players. You're not going to be able to kind of outspend people in softball. So you got to develop players and build a core that's good enough to get you over the hump. We thought that 2 years ago with Hamilton and company, but they don't have the bats, right, Justin? I think they need to develop better bats to compete. They've proven they have some arms, but they haven't had the elite bats to keep up with the top teams.
The problem is they've had talent on both sides of the ball, but they've never been able to succeed on both sides of the ball at the same time. I mean, Kansas's best success came in a 6-week period to start the 24 season when we all thought they were world beaters. Well, Kansas softball's version of being world beaters. And then cratered. Like, let's just be honest. They cratered down the stretch. And it's like, what was it about that period of time that made Kansas good? Because they were good. Like, I thought they were a tournament team through the first 6 weeks. Then on the back 6 weeks, no. And then last year, this past season, like, there was really no point where Kansas ever was much of anything to my mind from a postseason contention standpoint. So, like, I think Kansas has actually had some talent come in. To me, the biggest thing has been, I don't know if it's the development or if it's the execution that concerns me more. Because the talent has been there. The execution has failed at every turn. Honestly, they were playing so free, I think, through those first 6 weeks of the 24 season, and had some good arms, had some good bats. Occasionally they got together and had good games. But the biggest thing for me was then when they cratered, nothing went right. I don't know what this program's got to do to get to the postseason, because I do believe they've had talent. I think they've got coaching acumen there. I don't know what the missing piece is. I don't know what the missing piece is. Like, when you've had talent, when you've got good coaches, you win some games and then you just fall off a cliff. Like, I don't know how you fix that. At least not easily. Miss Nelson, do you have insights into that piece of it? Because I'm lost.
No, it's funny you say that because, like, we kind of have an answer for all of the teams that we've chatted about, like what they need to work on in the offseason. But Kansas continues to just kind of stump me, and obviously it's stumping all of you too. Like, I know we talked highly about them at the beginning of the show, the first couple episodes, just because of the season that they had last year. And there was a lot of encouraging things that were happening that, you know, maybe, just maybe, you know, their season will turn around this year and they'll make a tournament somehow. But I don't know. Like you said, they have the right pieces. They have the facilities. They have the coaching. They have everything. It's execution. I don't know. Maybe it's a deeper thing that no one knows. You know, sometimes people often overlook the way a team gets along or if they like each other, you know, in the locker room. So maybe that's the missing piece, kind of something that you can't really see on the outside looking in. But I guess we won't really know until we know.
I mean, I felt like they had a promising start. I know they started the season 1-4, but you gave Clemson a game, you gave FAU a game, you gave Ole Miss a game. Like, and I just it just felt like another season where, okay, maybe they can get some things figured out. And it just, like you said, it never clicked. Like, it just never did. And so I just don't know with them moving forward what the answer to this is.
Oh.
I never like advocating for coaches to be fired, ever. But I have a hard time, depending upon what Kansas's investment and expectations are of softball, given the record thus far of 95 and 138 since 2019.
But Phillip, but Phillip, the baseball success, I think, makes this more interesting, right? Because look at the success they're having this year with Coach Fitzgerald. Does that add pressure to softball or not? I don't know, but nobody saw that coming, and we'll see what that impacts McFalls and company moving forward in a Big 12 that's going to get a lot stronger next year.
Yes. Yeah. Like, it's going to be better next year. We've talked about it all season. Like, this was a young year, and Kansas has lost a lot again for a second straight season off of this roster. Like, it's do you want to go through a rebuild with Coach McFalls at Kansas right now? I don't know. Again, I don't like advocating for coaches to be fired. It's not my thing, unless they're just, you know, terrible people. And she is, from all we know, not. Let's see. We've hit Baylor, BYU, Iowa State, Houston. Lea threw me off here. Kansas. I believe the only one left for us to talk about then would be Utah, a team that we look at for this season, really disappointed, had some high points, but they lost so much. And it's this was the epitome of new young roster in the Big 12 this season. And I had someone in the Softball 365 discussion asking about whether or not Coach Hogue was on the hot seat, and I don't believe so for a moment, just because of this bad year. But I look at this team and go, I really think that we will see improvement next season based off how young this roster was. But they've got to figure out, because at one point in the year, they had like 6 games where they had blown a lead late. They've got to figure out how to close out games. And I think some of that's maturity and coaching and just getting the team to figure that out. But I trust Coach Hogue to get this team turned around from the season. This feels more like a blip than a sign of major concern for Utah to me.
Yeah, I mean, college softball is hard. And I think when you're a freshman coming in to play college softball, like, it's a really, really difficult transition. And obviously Utah has such a young team where you're having a lot of the roster go through that transition. So they're not just, you know, learning softball in the college world. They're trying to, you know, do life and do class and move away from home. And I think that probably impacted them a lot. And so last year was a rebuilding year, and I think they're going to be able to transition a little bit better. They have the people, they have the staff, they know what they need to do. I think they'll be okay, but it will be a little interesting because this past season seemed so strange and difficult and new to a lot of people. Justin, Eric?
I mean, I think the one thing, to be fully fair to Utah, and fair, not necessarily popular, like that World Series appearance a couple of years ago has been bookended by pretty bad years and missing the postseason. Like they had the World Series, they made the postseason the year after. But prior to that, they had a couple of years of missing. This year they miss, and it's pretty bad. So like Utah to me might be the biggest mixed bag in the conference just because they've had the highest of highs. They made the World Series, but they've also had some pretty significant lows with not even making the tournament, and even this year not really even being competitive towards the tournament. So it's such an interesting mixed bag for me. Like you had Mariah Lopez that got you to those highest highs. You even had DJ Gasso as a hitting coach, and you had the offense that showed showed his acumen to begin with. But Utah is the biggest mixed bag to me in the conference because I don't feel you can go into any year with Utah and 100% correctly estimate what's going to happen. I mean, recent history has shown predicting, lower bar versus higher bar is going to have at least a slightly better possibility of success. But even there, like you predict a low bar and they make the World Series. So like Utah is the biggest mixed bag because you never know what you're going to get. I feel like transfers that come in, recruits that come in, some may be amazing. Those that stay, those that go, like it's just such a mixed bag. And year to year, outside of like specific players, I don't feel like the program has a lot of consistency to it. The closest they've come to consistency is those couple of years of missing the tournament. And that's not the kind of consistency you want. When they're good and they have actual talent, they know what to do with it. I mean, I think this year you saw they had some actual talent with some of those comeback wins. It's just year to year as a whole, you never know what you're going to get. And that's hard to do because what do you do with that? What do you do with that level of unpredictability?
2 words: find pitching. Find pitching, whether it be the portal, developing them. They got to find pitching. We're going to find out if Paige Parker can do that. Their pitching really was an issue. I think their hitters will be fine. I think position players, they'll be fine. But can they find pitching to pitch in Salt Lake, especially in this environment they're in today? That's the question.
They have an 8-person freshman signing class. Big class with a lot of youth coming in. We'll see how many of them can be impactful next year for Amy Hogue. This is not a program that you look at, and we knew it coming in. It's like, this is a program that expects to make the tournament every single year. They've had nice periods. They've had nice runs. Again, if you tell me someone's on the hot seat, my question immediately goes to, when it comes to softball, what are the expectations for this sport at this school? Because outside of football and men's basketball, it varies across university what sports matter and what sports don't. That's reality, and that's only going to get worse as we continue to head into the future of college athletics and what matters and what doesn't, and who's got money for what. We're seeing schools cut softball programs that have been very successful, but despite that, it's got to go. And so it's just always a question to ask. And I'm not saying that softball doesn't matter at any of these universities, but if you're going to ask an athletic director and inject him with some truth serum and say, all right, rank your programs as far as most important, I think it's a big tell as far as how much rope do we give a coach? How much do we going to invest here? How many people outside of the department itself? How many alums want to invest in the program? Because especially now, as we continue forward, how much investment you have outside of just the straight athletic department. Look at Texas Tech. This is happening because you had alums who wanted to spend on softball. Like the programs that are doing it, it's not just because they've got all this money. Yes, the SEC has, money coming out of the wazoo. Yeah, the Big Ten does, but it's cold, so it's hard to compete up there. Do you have the money? Like, do you have the money to compete in the Big 12 in softball? Because that's kind of what it's going to take to be able to do so and get the players you need. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Eric teased it a lot last week. Next week, we will have our last weekly episode of the softball show. So we will have our let's call it our big off-season preview and what are our thoughts and try early predictions for the 2026 season. But as for today, I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight. Justin, as always, man, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm sorry we didn't get you on more than once, but it's whatever we can get from you is immensely appreciated.
I mean, to your credit, you did try. I have text messages of me saying, no, can't do it, I'm at a game. No, can't do it, I'm at a game. So it's really on me. It's me, not you. No, I'm glad we got to before the end of the year because it's always fun.
You are, as we mentioned, in Oklahoma City. Plenty of coverage on D1 softball. Eric, of course, will be covering Women's College World Series as well. Lea, what's going on in the Quad Cities for those who can't make it to OKC this weekend?
Hey, well, QC Craft Beer Week. Hit up one of the breweries for some good old Quad City beer. And then maybe watch some softball while you're there. How perfect is that?
Beer and collegiate sports on my TV. It's a perfect weekend. I assume we're having technical difficulties, so let's wrap up here. Thanks everybody listening. Leave us a nice review. Leave us a nice comment. Subscribe all over the place. We will be back next week, and maybe I'll have the technical issues figured out. I'm going to guess not, because Verizon Internet sucks. Enjoy the games this weekend, folks.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.